The first one, core asset development, is all about creating that reusable base of artifacts that are going to provide for product development. So what you are doing in core asset development is setting up this production capability for products. So all product development is going to be driven by the artifacts in the core asset base. And as the product line evolves, it's likely that new assets will be added to the asset base, older assets will be retired. Not many of our current customers are that far along. There are a couple. Most of our current customers are still in the early stages of product lines. They've adopted product lines, they have a champion in place, they're moving into full-scale routine production of products from core assets. The outputs of core asset development are, first of all, the core asset base itself, the production plan, the guidance for how to turn those core assets into products, and the product line scope. Now, you would think that going into core asset development, you ought to have some idea of the scope, the set of products that you build. In practice, most organizations have a rough idea in the sense that it may be we're going to base the product line on an existing set of products, or we've done some market and business projections and we see a range of future products in addition to the existing set of products. But it's not until you get into core asset development and you start looking at your areas of expertise and looking at what's common and what's variant across the initial proposed set that you really start to understand what this scope actually means. So when you're talking to your domain experts, you start to get an idea of the technical feasibility of doing a set of products as a product line. When you talk to your marketing and business people, you'll get an idea of whether or not you could sell that particular set of products in the marketplace. So it's as you get into the detailed analysis that takes place in core asset development that you really start to, in essence, understand what you're letting yourselves in for, which is why we have the product line scope as an output of core asset development. But recognize that going into core asset development, you at least have a rough idea. Coming into core asset development, you have things like the product constraints, the particular target products that you are going after. So the constraints might be, for this class of customers, we're going to deliver products on the Wintel platform. And for this other class of products, we are going after Linux. And so that has implications for your tool sets, for your development environment, and for the kinds of architecture and components that you will ultimately implement to support those markets. You also have some production constraints, like exactly how many people do we have to do this, and how much money has been allocated for the product line effort, and what's the expected time frame by which we're expected to produce something useful. What's our production strategy? Are we going to do this as a totally new effort outside of existing products? So our strategy is top-down. We're going to create a whole new architecture and a set of components for this new future product line. Or are we going to try to reuse as much as we can from existing products and artifacts, because that's where our intellectual capital is tied up and it's a lower startup cost? So that production strategy is the one we're going to use, and that will dictate the kind of architecture that we're going to create and the kind of components that we will be able to extract from those existing products or artifacts. And if we do go for the approach of using an existing product or an existing set of artifacts, then somebody has to take on the task of examining all of those for fitness of purpose in a product line context. So you've got a set of products, or you have some reusable designs, or what you think are reusable designs left over from earlier efforts. How much rehabilitation is it going to take to turn those into artifacts that are reusable across the proposed set of products. So these are the kinds of contextual influences on your core asset development. And I think I have probably talked about most of these already. Oh yeah, the pre-existing assets that you may have, in addition to assets that exist within the organization, there may be some things available through open source or the commercial marketplace. So it doesn't mean that everything has to come from an in-house source. And part of your business decision making will be which parts, which reusable assets in my products can come from external sources. How much am I going to subcontract? How much am I going to buy on the open marketplace? And when you're buying commercial products, one of the things you're going to have to do is do some vendor qualification to determine, is this vendor going to be around over the projected lifetime of this product line? Because you're going to be introducing dependencies on their upgrade cycle for your product line. So these are decisions that you are probably making now even outside of product lines whenever you go to a particular vendor. So a lot of the practices that you have in place right now are probably applicable in a product line context. If you're new to product lines, you wouldn't necessarily have thought of it in a multi-system context over a single system context. But I would hope that of the 29 practice areas, many of them will be familiar to you already. The product line scope, the set of products that ought to be built as a product line or that are being considered as a product line, might simply start out as a list of the 5 or 10 or whatever existing products we have in the marketplace already. So you look at those and you look at the capabilities that they provide, and you also look at what's common and variant across those capabilities. The scope needs to be drawn so that you have a pretty good chance of making money out of that particular set of products, and also needs to be drawn so that what you are going after is actually technologically feasible for the organization to do. So when you get into core asset development and you start talking to your domain experts, you may find out that there are areas of expertise that are not as strong as they should be. Or maybe you're planning to go into an area where you don't have the necessary in-house expertise today, and you're going to have to plug that gap by the time the product line hits the streets. So you'll have some decisions to make about how do we plug that gap. Are we going to hire outside consultants? Are we going to train our staff in this different area of expertise? Are we going to acquire another company that has the necessary expertise, which is often what organizations do. And so there's a lot of this kind of proactive business planning when you get into the practice areas associated with core asset development, and particularly the practice areas that deal with analyzing your current domain knowledge and analyzing the technological feasibility and the business prospects of the proposed set of products. The other thing I should say about the core asset base is that not every asset in the core asset base has to show up in every product, but enough of the assets in the core asset base have to show up in enough of the products to make it worthwhile to have done this in the first place.